Hey everybody, this is Devin Galladay, the Mystical Solutions to Modern Love, another week. And we are talking about Yesod this week. Yesod is, I'm going to show you, this is sort of the model that we always use. This is Yesod. However, it's kind of positioned in different places on different variations of the tree. So we're not going to use this model except to kind of quickly go over what we did last week. That this bottom triangle, and by the way, the positioning of Yesod is not going to matter in a minute, but the positioning of this stuff is basically highlighting Netzach, which shall we say is the domineering parent, and Hod, sort of, shall we say, the innocent child that receives everything. And they're very polar opposites. And they're sort of like these ideas within ourselves. In other words, sometimes we are all powerful, sometimes we are all not. Sometimes we're incredibly strong, sometimes we are absolutely not. And so they're very dynamic in terms of their differences. Yesod, this one here, is sort of the balancing, the balancer of those two ideals. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but I'm going to introduce you to a pattern of the tree of life that we haven't talked about before. And the reason why is because Yesod has such a dominant position in it. If you notice over here, here's our tree of life, and this is Yesod right there. What is interesting about it, this is actually, by the way, a version of the tree of life that came out by Rabbi Isaac Luria in, I think, the mid-1500s. So it's been around for quite a while. You're not going to see it very often unless it is sort of like on the cover of a Kabbalah with a K book. For those who don't know, that's we're talking about traditional Kabbalah. So this variation here doesn't have any paths that connect to this bottom sphere being the physical world, being what we'll call Malkuth, meaning kingdom. And that is our physical world. The same is true when we talk about this. We are talking about Malkuth, our physical world. Don't worry about the colors. One day we'll get into that, but it's not important right now. The important thing to understand about this is that this sphere here, Yesod, actually means foundation. And it's sort of kind of, at least in this variation of the tree, as you can tell, it is the first place that removes itself from the physical world. And at least according to this tree, the lack of paths coming from these other spheres into Malkuth kind of exemplify that Yesod is sort of like the foundation and the lens, or the filter, the chief filter that takes all of, shall we say, the upper layers of the tree of life, i.e. our influences of the divine, and allow that to connect to the manifestation. In a practical sense, that really means, here's sort of like our individual personalities, this bottom set of triangles. I could have made a better model of this. I think maybe I'll try to throw it in terms of the digital when we do this later. But the important thing to understand now, this is sort of like this bottom triangle right there deals with sort of like our individual personalities. It's pretty far removed from the divine. There's a whole lot of spheres that go in between it and us. And this is all of our stuff, this bottom triangle, that is not about our physicality. It's about what we think and we feel and how we use our intellect to, meander about the world. So the important thing to understand about Yesod, other than the fact that it's called basically all the light of the divine in this version of the tree kind of pools at Yesod before it heads down into the physical world, so we can use it. Probably the most important thing you will want to understand is that it's mostly represented by the idea of the moon. So if you were to look at the tree of life based upon sort of a golden dawn principle, more of an occultism standpoint, you're going to see the moon attributed here. What's important about the moon is that it changes all the time. In other words, when we see the moon from our vantage point, it can be anywhere from a sliver to a full, bright, powerful moon. But what's interesting about its constant change, because it's different every single day of the week, is that it changes in a pattern, is in a predictable, constant way. And the way I tend to look at it is that when we talk about Yesod, we're talking about the patterns in our lives, and we're talking about the kind of things that we do in sort of a habitual, almost animalistic way. Quite literally, we eat and drink, and we need sleep, and we perceive things the way that we perceive them. And this is one of the chief components of what separates us. In other words, sort of like our animalistic notion will sense fear and keep us apart from each other. What does all this have to do with our love life? Is that it behooves us in our long-term relationships to understand our own individual patterns. And those patterns include the kinds of things that we want, the love that we want to have in our lives, the kinds of things that fuel us and fill us, and the kinds of things that we embrace, consciously or otherwise, that will bring us joy, happiness, freedom, and all that other good stuff. And ultimately, the kind of things that will separate us from the animal. But understand that those patterns are choosing a partner is really important. But more importantly is understanding that this Yesod element is how we see the world. And so it's that thing that is part of the greater illusion, the thing that we talk about week after week after week, i.e. the further up the tree that we go, the closer to the divine we get, the more unity we have. The further we move away from the divine, the less unity we have, and the more focused we are on the individual, the details and bits and pieces like we talked about last week in Sowed. This one over here. And so the more conscious we are of the kinds that allow us to thrive, the patterns that we have, the kinds of things that we repeat over and over and over again, the more likely we are going to be able to find a partner who's going to fit well with us. So we want to be conscious of those kind of automatic patterns. That's one. And also, we have to recognize that somebody else has their own sort of patterns, their own sort of sense of ideals and how they live their lives. And that said, that means when you see somebody who's really close to being the right person, but they have these things that they do over and over again, you're not going to change them. You will, you get to appreciate them. You can embrace them. You can marry them and love them for 1,000 years. But if you see some sort of patterns, they're probably not going to change unless they do some particular self-work. So don't, leave your nagging and scolding and desire to change somebody else to fit more closely that will match your lens at home. It's not going to work. So anyway, love each other. This is a short one today. We're going to talk about the physical world. It's going to be fun. So I hope you're having a great day. If you, as always, get in touch with me at devingallaudet.com. As you can see down here, that's my name. Take away the space, add a .com, and we are gold. So I hope to hear from you soon, and much love. I hope you're loving each other, and I hope you're having great relationships. Mwah, mwah.